Therefore it says, wake up, sleeper. Get up from the dead. Christ will shine on you. So be careful to live your life wisely, not foolishly. Take advantage of every opportunity because these are evil times. Because of this, don't be ignorant, but understand the Lord's will. Saints of God, my eyes have seen the glory and the coming of the Lord. He's trampling out the village where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. I see him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps. They have builded him an altar in the evening dew and damps. I can read his righteous sentence by the dim and flaring lamp. His day is marching on.
Hello, my name is Brandon A.J. Davis. I am the founder of Content Writing Service and Conversation with Faith Leaders, and I'm delighted to have with you today my good friends and my mentors for the D.Min program. I'm a graduate of the Walker Cummings Fellows at United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio, and I was privileged to graduate in 2015. And so today I thought it not robbery to have with me my D.Min mentors, my instructors, the persons who got me through my doctoral program, the sainted men of God, Drs. Kenneth Cummings and Dr. Robert Walker. So Dr. Walker, Dr. Cummings, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you very much, Dr. Davis.
Thank you, sir.
I'm glad to have these gentlemen with me, and I thought it not robbery to bring them on the broadcast today to talk about theological education in a digital age. Many of us have been affected by COVID-19 in various ways, not just from self-quarantining. Some of you have been affected by sickness of COVID-19. Many of you have felt the weight of COVID-19 in terms of finances, being away from family and friends, having to figure out how to pastor your churches, how to do ministry in this new life that we're living. And one of the things that I have been concerned about is education. And I'm glad to know that there are many people who have decided to go back to school and to receive their education, be it secular school or theological education. And so we have two of my well-respected mentors and advisors who I think can bring a wonderful perspective about receiving education, particularly in Dr. Walker, Dr. Cummings, are you still there?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I think there was a glitch there for a second. There was a glitch for a second, but I think we're coming back. All right. So our first question I want to get into, and I'm going to direct this question to Dr. Walker. What have been your thoughts and or concerns regarding the use of technology as a means of communicating the gospel message?
Well, it's interesting that you would raise that question, Dr. Davis. And one of the things that came to me early on when I was faced with the question is that this is a real challenge for us today, because when we talk about the digital age and the church or theological education, we're talking about a critical divide between the millenniums and those who are the old school generation. Those of us who are part of the old school generation, we still value the old time way of doing our education. And that is getting a book, opening the book, that kind of thing. But on the other hand, when we look at the digital age, it's calling for us to look at a new way of engaging our formation and our learning. And And one of the challenges that I want to just lift up is that it creates a new language for us, and especially for those who say are 70 and younger. It's a challenge because it's introduced a process of learning that we have not fully embraced. But on the other hand, the generation behind us, they came into digital learning at the time of its inception within our community, and they're on board. It's second nature to them. So I think that the challenge is in our communities and also in education is how do we bridge that divide to make sure that both generations can come together and move ahead together, both speaking a common language, or maybe not speaking a common language, but they are at a place where they can complement each other in this learning enterprise. So I think that for me, that's a challenge. And so that means that even in our churches, it's similar. So we have to look at how then do we look at the past and bring that forward while not hindering the millennium and this digital generation for them as they pursue a quality education as well. So that's my response, Dr. Davis.
Dr. Cummings, same question. What are your thoughts concerning the use of technology as a means of communicating the gospel message?
I think it's a wonderful means of communicating the gospel, and I think that there are some churches that have positioned themselves earlier on for such a time as this, wherein others have not. Some have been of the mindset to preach the gospel. We're going to have a service of worship, and people can come. If they don't, the scripture says, "Shake the dust off your feet." And I think that that mindset has hurt a lot of our churches. There are some churches, different denominations and religious tradition, medium-sized and larger churches in particular, have positioned themselves with local cable outlets in terms of worship service. They have done so with social media platforms, Facebook and other places, and broadcast ministry. So when the pandemic hit and the restrictions came about, these churches were better able to continue to facilitate the transmission of the gospel, as well as Bible study, prayer meeting, and other aspects of ministry, more so than the other churches. And then so the other churches find themselves playing catch up. Now, all things are not equal, and we know that some churches have more resources than other churches. But there's also a realization that there are people in churches, large and small, who work in communications and do this kind of work for a living, and they're very proficient in it. And then there are some who maybe have not had any formal training in terms of social media or live streaming or broadcast. But nonetheless, they are as sharp as they can be, young people in particular. And some churches have not because they have asked not. And I think that people will serve themselves well, ministers and other religious leaders in the life of churches to work rather within the confines of their own membership, but not only that, but also friends and relatives, co-workers, neighbors, and others who would love to help set up such platforms to aid churches in communicating the gospel. We realize expenses are involved, but when you think about the return, it's so great that the expenses is not insurmountable, in my opinion, that churches cannot position themselves to start playing catch up, regardless of the size. And they may not have platforms in every area, but they will have enough platforms to keep their members connected. But not only that, but also to broadcast to others, because we don't know who's going to tap into a stream or a service or a broadcast or a platform and hear the word of God and be touched by it. So I just think that some churches have done well and some have done are playing catch up, but it behooves all of us to help all of us, to help one another.
I agree 100%. I think that this season has been a duality of learning and a duality of acknowledging who we are in ministry. It's been a blessing for some churches to be able to realize the significance of being a part of the technological age. My home church here in North Carolina is a small country church, but thanks be to God, we have persons in that church who have embraced technological advances and have helped to usher the church into this new age of online ministry. And the pastor of the church is doing a marvelous job in being connected with the members of the church. Bible study via Facebook Live, church service via Zoom. The same for my church, my home church in Cincinnati, the church that I'm still a part of today, remotely, Allen Temple Academy Church, Dr. Alphonse Allen, and Lady Fran Allen. Even though Allen Temple is a large church with a major audiovisual ministry, there were some things that we had to figure out so that we can be able to connect our people to, this media age. We had to remember that the senior citizens are not Facebook savvy. Some of them are, but not all of them. So we had to figure out how to connect the worship service to telephone conference and Zoom and Facebook Live and Instagram Live. And we had to figure out how to communicate messages because a lot of them were looking for stuff on the website. So we had to update our website. So I think this has been an interesting season in the life of the church. The next question I want to ask you, and Dr. Cummings, we'll keep this with you. As practitioners of social engagement, both of you are social active agents. You have been, you may have retired because of the pandemic in some ways, but still you are practitioners of social engagement through the lens of the gospel. How have preachers and lay leaders handled the social crisis of this year? Dr. Cummings?
Well, this is a loaded question because we're sharing from the well springs of our own experience as well as our insight into what has presently happened through the lens of the media, of television, print, and otherwise. But as we look at the gospel message and social crisis of this year, we are confronted with this age-old question that Dr. Du Bois talked about of racism. It hasn't gone anywhere. And for the most part in America, it has raised its ugly head in a manner wherein it is fashionable in some quarters to be racist. You can't legislate morality, but you can preach the gospel and hope to convict people in the context of their hearts. But when we look at the social crisis of the day, I look at racism, and then there's this issue of economic inequality, and then there's the issue of education and how it is unequal, yet everyone seems to have to take the same test. And then you have the issue of employment. And now with COVID, you have this exposed situation of inequality in the healthcare, where people of color are dying disproportionate to their numbers because of COVID, but not only dying, but also are ill. And once some of them maybe overcome that illness or get out of the hospital, they're still swamped with healthcare challenges. And so these crises are front and center, but yet when you look at the landscape of our federal government and the legislature, that you have tax cuts, and then you have people who are grudgingly want to approve measures to help people who are hurting. Now, you look at some people have not suffered at all, health-wise, economically, financially, during this crisis, but millions are are suffering. And so the gospel has much to say about how we treat our neighbor. And there is a mindset that once you think about extending benefits to the have-nots, then the ugly language of socialism come into being, in language such as liberalism and the social gospel and progressivism, as if these are horrible, horrible words. So I think that there's no misunderstanding of the gospel, Jesus saying about to love God and treat neighbor as self. And we have a big divide in this country, beginning with the president, to name it, the Congress, and in state legislatures. And then there are many ministers who are living their lives in silos, and they are preaching a gospel that is void of economic and social justice. Thanks be to God that there are some on the tower who proclaim the word of God unapologetically, even while they are being slammed. But I just think that the nation has a long way to go, and ministers of the gospel of all colors have a long way to go. In my mind, it is impossible to divorce economic and social justice issues from the gospel. As we understand in Judeo-Christian context, it was out of slavery and impoverishment and oppression that God called a people and began the nation that we come to know as Israel and the New Zion. So that it cannot be divorced, in my opinion.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Dr. Walker, same question. How have preachers and lay leaders handled the social crisis of this year?
Well, I think that in my observation, they're really stepping up to this new opportunity that's before them, that's been brought to light by COVID. I think that when you look at the opportunities to move out and to look at ministry in the public square and in the marketplace, I think that this is an opportunity for many of our faith communities and our churches to reevaluate where they are. And I think that it's and to become a part of God's kingdom building as to address these issues. I think that I agree with Dr. Cummings, where I think that our federal government and those things that have been promised to us as citizens and through the many networks and services that's provided. But however, in my observation, we still fall woefully short in terms of providing ample resources to care for the needs of all of God's people who live not only in America, but across the globe. So, and so I think that COVID has kind of pulled the cover off of some of the promises or some of the good intentions that we have as a faith community or a church. I think that it shows that we still have a ways to go in terms of loving our neighbor as ourselves, and see that their basic needs of themselves and families are cared for. Because when I look at some of the things that confront us today, I just look at Dr. Cummings mentioned the social unrest and injustice, the increase in poverty and hunger, racial injustice and discrimination, political misuse of power. And I want to even look at some things that we don't like to talk about. Black on black crimes in our neighborhoods and elder abuse, those things that hit our doorsteps. How then, how are we embracing these as opportunities to enhance our ministry response to those who live in the communities where we live and have our being each day? So when you ask me how is the church doing. I want to say that it is providing an opportunity for the church as a whole to revision its ministry in light of these social events that have transpired in the last month, that have shown themselves to us in the last 9 months or so, and those things in ways that we can become more involved to address them in very practical ways. When we began to look at, am I my brother's keeper? Am I my sister's keeper? And what does that mean to me as being a member of a faith body?
For those of you who are joining our conversation today, for those of you who are joining in, let me say, Dr. Cummings, Dr. Walker, we have with us some of your students, Reverend Albert Moss III. Has Reverend Moss graduated? Has he already graduated?
He's on his way.
He's on his way. So we have a doctor in the making, Dr. Reverend Albert Moss III. We have Dr. Albert Bailey, my good friend and brother. Dr. Bailey is watching us. Dr. Graham is watching us. Colonel Graham. So we have some of your students who are here listening in, and all of what you're saying is bringing back being in the classroom with you too. This is the reason why we sought out to be Walker Cummings Fellows, because we wanted to be able to bridge both our theological and biblical obligation to God's people with our social and fundamental consciousness. The way we do ministry has to always be in the direction of meeting the needs of the people, whatever the needs may be. And I think that this question helps to bring in question number 4, which is the need. Question number 3. With all of the things happening both socially and politically, has there been an increase in the need for real theological education? And I think you both already segued into the answer, and I think the answer is yes. Because when you look at the social ramifications of a president who on his way out of office is doing everything he can to speed up the execution of people. We've already seen one black young man being executed by the government. There's a lady who was set to be executed by the federal government. And from my understanding and research, this will be the second woman in the history of the country to be executed by the federal government. And then there's 4 other young men that are black who will be executed by the federal government. And on his way out, Donald Trump is doing everything he can to speed up that process. That's a social concern, and it's also a concern of theological ethical proportion. So, Dr. Walker, staying with you,
yes, sir.
Do you think there's been a real need, especially in COVID-19? And let me just throw out there, I think COVID-19, with all of our churches now being online and on social media, I think we have learned that not only is there a real global pandemic outside, there's a real epidemic regarding our theological consciousness. We've been exposed to some bad theology in this global pandemic.
Yeah, and you're correct. I think that there's a need for theological education, not only because I think that it will provide, well, for me, it provided a shift in my thinking. And when I think of theological education, it is not about reading the Bible to proof text my position. When I think of the need for theological education, I've learned that it's about strengthening one's own formation, spiritual formation, and personal identity, strengthen that person who God has created and what God is calling that person to be. to be involved with a discernment process, to examine yourself and to examine all that God has been to you thus far, and what God has done for you thus far, and what God is calling you to do in the future. So this formation process is simply an opportunity for you to engage at a different level, at a deeper level, to look at all the opportunities that are out there, to look at the way that you're gifted and how God has blessed you, and to put and to frame that in a way that you will allow God, or God can use that to improve the kingdom right around you. And I think that, and through that formation, if we improve the kingdom around us based on our discernment, and I think that can happen in a number of ways. It can happen through our continuous worship. It happens through our prayer. It can happen through our Sabbath. There are so many ways, but I think the idea is, how then do we position ourselves to then receive new information that will help to transform us to really become more sturdy servants for kingdom building right where we are.
Absolutely. Dr. Cummings.
Theological education.
Yes, sir. And I agree 100%. Being in the position to receive this education and being in the position to want to receive it, I think that is so timely. Dr. Cummings, I want to direct the same question to you. And I know that you have been paying attention to it, as well as Dr. Walker. Has there been an increase for the need of real theological education, especially in this season?
I think that there has been an increase in the need, but I also believe that need is ongoing. It is unending. I think that when I entered ministry over 40 years ago and told my pastor that God had called me to preach the gospel, the first words out of his mouth were, Kenneth, a call to ministry is a call to preparation. And not only did he say that, he said, I'm going to check with the dean at Morehouse School of Religion, and I'm going to take you up there to have a conversation. So I think that it's easy for ministers to say that, especially those with theological education, say that other people need to go to school. But it's another thing for them to say that, let me help facilitate how that could possibly happen. Let me use my resources and experience to connect you to people and to institutions to help facilitate God's calling and claim in and on your life. So I think that we need to be careful as a people of faith to say what other people ought to be doing. When I went to school, I didn't have a mortgage. I had been married a very short period of time. I didn't have children. So then I didn't have to walk away from or give up a lot in order to go to school. My wife and I had to live apart for a short period of time until we could do otherwise. But the point is that theological education is so important because, first of all, it helps the individual to clarify his or her call, to flesh it out. Did I hear the call correctly? Is God calling me to ministry, period? Is God calling me to the pulpit ministry, i.e. the pastorate? Is God calling me to a specialized ministry? Or I'm uncertain, I'm awaiting further light, but I know that God has his hands on me and I have a call. So theological education through Bible, through theology and church history, and through the interdisciplinary subjects helps an individual to form an understanding of who this person is, to flesh out some of the gifts that you might have for ministry, gifts, skill sets, and graces. It helps to the individual to take a look at his or her context where you're serving. What works in the country right here may not work in this particular urban area in some contexts. So then you have to understand the whole context of where you're serving the people. I serve the church, 2-point charge as it is called, and in Mississippi. One was the country church, and one was city church. So then, theological education helped me to understand, along with my wife, that Kenneth, the sermons that you preach right over here at the city church with the clerks and the school teachers may not go over as well as you preach out in the country with farmers and some of the factory workers. Not that these people are ignorant or unlearned, but there are some dynamics at place. And so I just think that theological education helps us to understand the context and where we're sitting and serving to be more effective in the proclamation of the gospel. Let me add quickly that it is also important for people such as I, Dr. Walker, you, and others who are outside of outside of the seminary and the academy right now, but we are in position to do workshops. We are in positions to put together Zoom meetings. We are in a position to mentor others to help them to understand, because they may not have the opportunities that we have had for theological education, but we can mentor other folk and help them to become more effective in their roles as pastors and ministers of the gospel.
Dr. Cummings, I like the way you just put that. That is so significantly important, because one of the things that I have paid attention to, and I mentioned this before we started this conversation, was that a lot of my colleagues and friends have begun to go back to school. Many of them I thought had already been to seminary. They had already had education, and I didn't know that they had not been to seminary. As a result, we have had conversations that has centered around our theological response to the pandemic. And I have listened to many of them talk about different issues that I myself would not have thought about. And that's the blessing of a theological education, is that you get to see God in different aspects of human life and suffering. Dr. Walker, you as a lay preacher, I know that you had an opportunity to engage folks in Bible studies and persons in your community about this. You know, everybody in Dayton knows Dr. Walker. If you're living in the Dayton area and you don't know Dr. Robert Walker, shame on you, because this is one of Dayton, Montgomery County's premier activists serving on the Board of Education. Are you still on the Board of Education, Doc?
No, I chose not to run the last year.
Okay. Okay, but you're still actively engaged in a technological way with the community, and we're grateful for that. The same for Dr. Cummings. Dr. Cummings, help me to pronounce the area that you live in. I struggled all day.
Hephzibah, just like in the Bible, Hephzibah.
Hephzibah, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hephzibah is a suburb of Augusta, same county. Yes.
Okay, I knew what it was. I knew where you was located, but I struggled all day to get that word out. But I thank you, gentlemen, for helping us to clarify that significant question, because living in this current age, we need strong theological voices to help us to articulate what God is saying. And before I go into our next question, I would like for Dr. Robert and for Dr. Cummings, respectively, to just give us an idea of what you critically think God is saying to us. Dr. Walker?
Yeah, I think that God has given us a chance to look at, ourselves and to evaluate the way that we are living and the way that we are doing ministry, the way we're relating to our brothers and sisters from a universal perspective. But I think that it's an opportunity for us to look at that space that God has allowed us to be involved in, and to identify ways that we can sharpen our gifts to become more effective servants. How can we allow our lives to become more transformative so that we can reach out and to address critical needs in our community that's going to improve the quality of life for everyone? You talk about my involvement in Dayton, and right now, one of the things when we talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, That's a significant movement. And I wish that every church would get on board with it. However, many of the churches are on board with it, but they look for members of those churches and people in the community to step forward and to become allies. And so just because you are becoming involved with the Black Lives Movement doesn't mean that you are any less than a Christian. But I'm able, and so with that, we've advocated within the city because we've had some issues over the years with police brutality. And so now we have, the city is looking at how then do we address those issues going forward to ensure that the needs of our people are going to be met with dignity and with respect. And so I'm blessed to serve with a group of about 20 people that look at that. We've been meeting every 2 weeks to say, how can we as a community become more responsive to the needs of those folk who are being who encountered the police, but to make sure that that relationship is humane on both parts. And so for me, that's a way that God is calling me to continue to be involved in the life of the community, but also to use my calling, and that is to be a community servant and to address some of the hard issues that, for whatever reason, everybody will not have the opportunity to do or has been blessed to do. And so God gives us different talents and God give us different opportunities to step into. So I'm grateful that this is just one that I can continue to be a witness with. But I think that, but most of all, I do it in the name of the gospel, in the name of the church, because wherever I go and wherever my church go, I want to be seen as that being congruent.
Dr. Walker, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I really appreciate you expounding on that and helping us to understand that what we do should be for God's people. And wow, thank you for the way that you just put together that sentence about your calling was that you be a servant of the people, a community servant. I think one of the things that we often misdiagnose in the life of a preacher is understanding what their preacher does and why they do what they do. Some churches fail in understanding why their pastor wants to incorporate the poor and the struggling and the heartbroken into their churches, particularly when you're in areas where the church culture might be influent and sophisticated. People struggle while the preacher wants to bring in other fractions and other people into their congregation. That's their calling. That's what God has specifically called them to do. And it's good to still hear in today's language someone actively saying, God has called me to be a servant of the people. Dr. Cummings, what is your thoughts and what do you think God is saying to us in the midst of this pandemic?
Well, I think that when you look at theological education on one hand and the issues of economics and social issues as the question is framed, on the other hand, I think that God is at work within me and others as well in the context of helping people to understand issues and how to articulate issues. Dr. Gardner Taylor, a number of years ago, preached a sermon entitled What Reality Is and Is Not. And so today, there is a mindset among many Christians that a warped sense of what reality is, not just speaking of the election results, but also conspiracy theories and a number of other things. But the reality is that, as Dr. Walker eloquently pointed out, that police brutality is rampant. The level of accountability is absent, so it's seen. We have picture after video after clip after shot of people who are unarmed and unviolent or dying at the hands of police for minor infractions, if infractions at all. Then how do we deal with that? We have even in the midst of this COVID, the recent newscast of number of students who are grappling with online education who are failing. Now, many of these are students who have done well traditionally, but then you have a number of other students who don't have access to because they maybe live in rural areas or the broadband width or whatever the case may be, the type of internet service that they need to even get online. So you have disparity there as well. You have more and more people in line for handouts, and we see that very poignantly during Thanksgiving and this upcoming Christmas season. And so economic and socially, we have all of these issues. And so we say what reality is and what reality is not. Many people who are just barely making it are working 2 jobs and more, and number among the working poor. And so then once you come back to economic and social justice issues on one hand and the theological framing on the other hand, then it becomes important for people of faith, lay and clergy, to be able to articulate what is going on with data, with analysis, with human life, human interest stories, so then that we are doing more than just preaching the gospel, but that we are living in a realm of advocacy to advocate for those who cannot advocate for themselves. And I think that that's so important. So what God is doing in terms of with Dr. Walker and myself, working with this doctoral program with students and others, is to help people to articulate what is going on in our particular context, and to yoke them with others and to help them to be able to articulate why we need public policies that deal with issues of fairness and decency.
My goodness, that's amazing. Let me ask you four questions, Dr. Walker, Dr. Cummings. How long have you both been in the doctoral program in seminary now?
Well, I serve as a mentor now I'm in my 20th year serving as a mentor. I'm in my third focus group with Dr. Cummings. I first worked I did a focus group with Dr. Paddock, who's a local Episcopal priest in Dayton, and we did one on ministry in the public square. Before then, I did a focus group with Dr. Thomas from Luther's Theological Seminary, and we did one on intercultural communication. And now I'm with Dr. Cummings, and we've been together since 2010 with the prophetic preaching and praxis. And so one of the things that I think that is important for me to say is that I have been blessed to be a practitioner in urban ministry and in urban work, what I call inner city work, for over 40 years. And before I retired. And so I'm in my 50th year of service in the Dayton community, and in my 30th year of service in some way through United Theological Seminary, working with students and helping them to sanitize their faith beliefs to be congruent with what we believe that God is calling people to be and to do.
Dr. Walker stated that we've been working together for 10 years, and we've had a number of students from different religious traditions to come through. We presently have about 27 or 28 students in the doctoral program that we're serving together. Prior to serving as a mentor in this particular focus group, when Dr. Hudson brought me on board at United Theological Seminary, he asked me to work with students who were in what is called project continuation, which meant that they had finished their classroom time, but they had not completed their doctoral theses. So I was helping them to wrap up their doctoral theses and did some independent study classes until this focus group was formed about 10 years ago. But prior to that, I had opportunities to work at the University of Cincinnati, where I taught the course, The Black Church in America, for several years. And then also at Lexington Theological Seminary, where I taught homiletics, and at Asbury Theological Seminary, where I taught Methodist studies. So I have been a person that God has blessed to be able to have one foot in the academy / seminary as well as the church. And I think I'm the richer for that.
Yes, sir. And and as a recipient of those riches, I'm grateful again to have met both of you. I was looking for a doctoral program. Well, let me just say honestly, I was not looking to do the D.Min program at the time that I did it. In 2012, I was looking towards a master's in sacred theology, and I had been accepted to Pittsburgh Theological Seminary in Pittsburgh, and it just so happened that the person who was over that particular program had received an offer to become a president at another school, and so the school wrote me back and said, we need for you to clarify exactly what you're wishing to study, so that we can align that study with, so that we can align an academic track with what you're trying to study. And a couple people, Judge Anderson and Dr. Jamison Hunter, formerly pastor of Macedonia in Dayton. He is now in the DC area. They reached out to me enthusiastically and said, you need to get in the D.Min program today. And I reached out to Reverend Stanley Hurst, and he told me, he said, hey, listen, man, you need to join the Walker Cummings group. You all about social justice, and AME Church is about social justice and social change and social holiness. You need to be in this group. And I said, I don't know. I think I found the group I want to be in. I said, what group you getting in? He said, man, I'm getting in this group. And so he called me back and told me, you need to get in this group, Davis. And I'm so glad I listened to him because I have been made a much smarter individual as a result of being in the Walker Cummings group. And I can't thank you both enough for what you taught us and for what you gave to us. I really can't thank you both enough.
Thank you.
I see we have a couple of our students from a couple of your students, the Reverend Dr. Carolyn Shorter.
Yes.
She's watching us on YouTube. She says,
All
"Listen to you, Dr. Shorter. We're glad to see you here." We have one of Dr. Walker's special students, Dr. Georgia Alexander, Reverend Dr. Chaplain Georgia Alexander. Amen. She's watching with us. We was in just a little funny side story. We was in one of our cohort groups in Georgia, in Savannah, Georgia, and we was working with Dr. Walker and Dr. Cummings, and we was trying to get these documents together, and Dr. Alexander was just struggling. She was just having a difficult time trying to grasp this style of academic writing. And Dr. Walker just had to pull her to a side and just say, listen, let go of your fears. We got you. We're standing with you. We're not going to let you fall. This is what we're here for, to get you through this. And in Dr. Walker's special way, he alleviated all of her fears. And this woman went on to become a wonderful addition to the academy, a wonderful addition to the hospital as a chaplain, certified chaplain, and as a preacher. We thank God for Dr. Alexander. That's my friend. Amen.
Yeah.
That is my good friend. Our focus is in relation to you two and the work you do specifically. Looking into 2021, what are your hopes and aspirations for prophetic preaching and practice as you begin? Would this be a new series, or are you guys still continuing in your current series of cohorts?
We are continuing, and it's a continuation. It's our prayer that we will have 3 new students joining us in the January intensive, because we are graduating 3 in December. And so we try to be keep that as a constant number. And the seminary have been kind to us to add another mentor to our group, and that's Dr. Brenda Braun.
Yes.
And so we're so delighted to have her to be a part of our mentoring team now. And so it's allowing us to really delve deeper into sharing the pedagogy of our focus group with the students. But I think that, and I'm aware of time, but what I want to say is that how blessed I am to have had the opportunity of working with Dr. Cummings for 10 years, and also for over 50 students, because each one of them has helped me to grow more, helped me to understand ministry at a deeper level based on their context, based on their lived experiences. And so the Lord allows me to continue to grow in this educational endeavor, the theological education endeavor. So I wanted to just say that for the sake of those of you who are considering theological education, and I would encourage you to do that, because you never get too old to learn.
I would simply say amen to that, Dr. Walker. And I worked with the Urban Center at United Theological Seminary prior to working together in this doctoral focus group. And we've been knowing each other since about 1990. So I think that we may be the only group, focus group at the seminary is lay and clergy. And I think that both of us bring some different perspectives, hopefully that enriches the group. And as he stated so eloquently, that this learning enterprise is precious in that we not only help facilitate learning, but we are also learning from the rich papers and projects that the students are carrying out semester by semester.
What are your goals for and what are your goals for 2021 as it relates to prophetic preaching and praxis? What you would like to see as a whole within the community, Dr. Cummings?
Well, we are kind of halfway limited in terms of what we can do, in that everyone who's in the doctoral program has set parameters of expectations. And then in addition to that, in the focus group, prophetic preaching and practice, specialize in a particular area. But Dr. Walker and I all have been thinking about ways in which we can instill an institute of a prophetic preaching and praxis beyond the seminary, so that we would have more time to develop in terms of preaching series, different preaching styles, individuals who have demonstrated preaching. Raphael Warnock, Dr. Warnock is under attack in Georgia, running for in the runoff for governor. I mean, in the runoff for a U.S. Senate seat. But much of the attack going up against him is because of his prophetic witness, and so you're going to be attacked because of that. But so I'm thinking that if we could help people to shape messages and content and some how-tos and some frameworks outside of the traditional Sunday morning service and Bible study to deliver the gospel and to touch people's lives.
I'm sorry, my mic was muted. Dr. Walker, I had my mic muted. I'm sorry. What are your goals? What are your hopes and aspirations for prophetic preaching and praxis as a whole, looking forward into 2021?
Yeah, it's simple. Howard Thurman in one of his books wrote, give me the courage. And I think that, and I appreciate the article that you just wrote, Dr. Davis, about the character and vocation of the preacher. I simply hope that as students who are committed to following the life and teaching of Jesus Christ, who come into our focus group, is willing to that they are willing to do the hard work of looking at their context, looking at their lived experiences, and see where God is moving them in a way that they can look at those contexts and tell the truth. To look at those contexts and tell the truth. And to have that truth framed both theologically and biblically and historically, so that nobody has to question the level of exegesis, the level of their research, and for it to be delivered in their own way. Because I think that our communities are hungry for people who's willing to do truth telling. But you also have to have the courage to stand up with some of the backfire that will come your way. But I think that that's part of being in Christian ministry. That's part of following the Christ, because it's going to it may not get you physically crucified, but it's going to get you crucified, and it may be just spiritually or other ways. But it's a tough life, but God is calling people. And so I simply hope that as people come through prophetic preaching and practice, that they will be able to withstand the fire of and challenge of ministry in an integrous and truth-telling way.
Absolutely. Let me just say, I have been blessed to be able to have my two mentors with me today, Dr. Walker and Dr. Cummings. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule and having this conversation with me, which I felt was a very needed conversation as we close out 2020 and as we look into 2021. I'm glad to have been a part of this group, and I'm glad to know the different people that I have met on Facebook who are seeking theological education at United Theological Seminary and who chose to be in your group. When I was seeing your names pop up in conversation, I'm like, I know those two guys. I know them, and I'm glad to know that there are so many people like me, like-minded, who have such a great respect for the work that you do. I ask this question to all of my guests, using the context of our conversation. Define unholy silence. Dr. Walker, I'll go with you.
Okay. Unholy silence is when we allow our personal agendas, ambitions, and other mobility recognition prevent us from speaking and modeling the image of God and to do truth telling and the work of justice. For me, that's what unholy silence is. And as a child of God and a follower of Jesus, I simply hope that my silence will not be unholy. But I think but most of all, that I will always be able to speak when God has given me a word to say.
Amen. Dr. Cummings, using the context of our conversation, define unholy silence.
The 13th century Italian poet Dante is reputed to have said the hottest place in hell is reserved for those who remain silent during time of great moral crisis. And so I think that by way of definition, unholy silence is lacking in the courage and conviction and being fearful to address evil and ill in the world. So my prayer is that God will enable us to overcome that fear and be reminded what the Beatitude teaches us, that blessed are you when men shall persecute you and revile you and speak all manner of evil falsely against you for my sake, and that God will give us the courage and the will to tell the truth.
Amen. Dr. Walker, Dr. Cummings, thank you so much for being with me today. I can't thank you enough for having this conversation with me, and for all of you who have joined in. Thank you, and I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. The privilege.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity.
You move forward.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to helping in any way that I can with the initiative of developing this extended aspect of the group and helping to format, the homiletics and the theological discourse of prophetic preaching and praxis. So we'll speak after the show. That's right up my alley. So I would love to assist my mentors in whatever way possible for that. Again, thank you both for being with me today. My brothers and sisters, theological education is not just something preachers do. Theological education is something children of God do who want to deepen and expand their understanding of God, their understanding of God's word. And so if you are looking for theological educational training, I invite you to look at two schools, Payne Theological Seminary in Wilberforce, Ohio, and United Theological Seminary in Trotwood, Ohio, which is a suburb of Dayton. If you are a pastor or a layperson looking to attend seminary for the purposes of receiving a doctoral degree in ministry, I want to extend to you the Walker Cummings Group. You can find them at www.united.edu, and you can look under the cohorts and you will find information on prophetic preaching and praxis under Dr. Kenneth Cummings and Dr. Robert Walker. Our thought for today: racial equality as a normative influence of American values would not happen through a successional change of leadership. Neither would it happen through a series of conversations that only aim to prove our willingness to talk about it. Concerned people like the church must be willing to see God not just in the beautiful and flowery texts of faith and hope, but also in the everyday social conditions of our human experience. The inconvenience of our humanity as normalized behavior is the true essence of racial equality. Seeing each other as God truly sees us will open the pathways toward racial harmony and acceptance, the only American value that matters. This has been Conversation with Faith Leaders. My name is Brandon A.J. Davis, your host, and I invite you to tune in next time, Sundays at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. God bless. Stay safe.